Hi, this is Dr. Elinor Robin. I'm a mediator in Boca Raton, Florida, and this is the second videotape in a series of 3 videotapes in which I talk about divorce, different aspects of divorce, and how you can get yourself through to the light at the end of the tunnel. Often divorce feels like being in a wet, moldy, long, dark tunnel, but it is possible to move through. Yes, divorce is the most difficult transition of our adult lives, but it's not an impossible transition. And divorce also brings with it wonderful benefits, because divorce provides us with an opportunity to look at our lives, assess where we are, where we want to go, and then create action plans to get there. Today, I want to talk about a legal divorce. And often people think that the legal divorce is the be-all and end-all. Once they're divorced, they're legally divorced, they'll really be divorced. And that isn't quite true, because we still need to go through the physical, the psychological, the social, the financial, and the logistical divorce. But the legal divorce is key. And a legal divorce has basically 5 points. These are the 5 points. When children are involved, a legal divorce requires some kind of parenting plan. And that means, where are the children going to be at any given point in time? We want the parents to create a time-sharing schedule so that they know where the child is going to be at any given time. And in the event of a disagreement, this is the plan, the fallback plan that they will fall back on. So, for instance, they may be doing just fine, open and flexible, everything. The children just kind of seamlessly go back and forth. And then one day, the husband's brother and the wife's brother are getting married on the same weekend in different cities. Whose wedding do the children go to? Well, the parenting plan, when it's created properly, the couple should be able to go back to that parenting plan and look and see whose time this should be, and that ends the dispute. And that's really what we want. We want to end parenting disputes as a result of divorce. A good parenting plan will also talk about who's going to take responsibility for what aspects of the children's lives, what kind of decisions how the parents are going to make decisions, and maybe any agreements that the parents have already made about decisions on the children's life. The second piece that needs to be decided before you move through the transition of divorce, the legal transition, is equitable distribution has to be decided. That's what we call it in Florida. Some other states, they call it something else. But the bottom line is, the assets and the debts of this marriage, of these people, have to be divided, distributed, and there has to be some legal notation that says who's going to get what. So now is a very good time to run a credit report so that you and your spouse are both aware what a bank or lenders say you owe. It's very important to know if your marital debts are really in your Social Security number or your spouse's Social Security number, because even though you and your spouse may decide and agree to divide debts in a particular way, if the lender who holds that debt is not in agreement with you, the plan can blow up in your face later on. It's important to look at all of your assets when you're talking about dividing them up. That means your insurance policies, those with a value and those without a value. Who is going to remain the owner on those insurance policies? That's a critical piece, because if I am not the owner, there's no way. I want to look at the vehicles, the cars, the marital home, certainly, and any other residential properties we have. I want to do some investigation and find out whose name is on the deed, whose name is on the note, whose name is on the mortgage. And when I have all that information, it's going to help me and my spouse make decisions about how we're going to divide this up. So, The next phase, the next area that has to be decided is alimony. And alimony is simply money that's going to change hands between the husband and the wife subsequent to divorce. There's many ways we can structure alimony depending on what the parties want and need. Is the alimony going to be modifiable, or is it going to be non-modifiable? Is it going to be modifiable as to the duration, the length of time somebody's receiving? Is it going to be modifiable as to the amount? These are questions that a husband and a wife have to ask themselves and each other and come up with a plan that works for them. We could call alimony temporary alimony, maybe temporary just until the divorce is done. It could be rehabilitative alimony. Someone needs to go back to school. She or he has a rehabilitative plan, how they're going to rehabilitate themselves so that they can earn a living in the future. It could be bridge the gap alimony, that maybe there's a short gap that needs to be bridged. For instance, a woman who is 63 years old may need some form of support until she hits 65 and is then eligible for Medicare. We can have durational alimony for a set duration, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the parties agree to. Or we could have permanent periodic alimony, which could theoretically be for the rest of the life of the payor and the payee, the person paying and the person receiving. And then finally there can be lump sum alimony. Rather than having ongoing payments, one of the parties takes a big chunk of money up front. Alimony can have serious tax consequences, and so before you sign anything or make any decisions or agree to anything, you should certainly talk to your accountant as to what tax consequences you might encounter in the alimony arrangement that you're looking at. Remember, though, when you're creating an alimony agreement, one of the things you want to look at is the need of the person who is going to be receiving the alimony and the ability to pay of the person who is paying. So you may want to look at your expenses. What does it cost the husband to live? What does it cost the wife to live on a monthly basis? Does the husband, I'll use kind of gender stereotypes for purpose of this video just to make it easier to understand, even though we know that sometimes the husband receives alimony and sometimes the wife does. But if, for our example, the husband was paying the alimony, when we add up his necessary expenses, does he have any money left over to pay the wife? If he does, and we add up the wife's expenses and she has a shortfall, then you have a good argument that you might need some alimony here. If you don't, then your argument becomes weaker. Big variation. If you have questions, good idea to talk to an attorney. Next, the next thing that has to be looked at is child support. And child support is basically money that's going to go from one parent to the next to help the parent who either has the children more of the time or who earns significantly less money to provide the children with the household that's more in line with what the parent who has a greater income can provide. In Florida, we have a specific way and a specific chart that we use to calculate child support. Whatever state you are in probably has something similar. So you may want to do some research and figure out how child support is calculated in your state. Things to consider are, of course, the number of overnights or the number of days that the child spends with each parent and what each parent's net income is. It's something you might have to do a little research on. Of course, you can also ask in the courthouse, you can ask an attorney, you can ask certain financial planners might also have that information, and an accountant might have that information also, depending on where you are. The last phase of this legal divorce we'll call everything else. And if the parties have decided to use attorneys, then legal fees very likely would go in this everything else section. In my mediation practice, where almost all of the couples coming through our process are unrepresented, they have decided to go through divorce without attorneys, there is no legal fees, no attorney's fees involved. And so what we talk about often in the everything else are just the odds and ends. How is this couple going to communicate with each other, and how are they going to treat each other subsequent to divorce? What are they going to do about the income tax deduction for the children, if there are children, goes in that section? And what are they going to do if a conflict arises in the future? So this everything else section often looks at the future and how we're going to handle kind of the things that don't quite fit into any of the other sections. Anyway, I want to thank you for being with me this long. If you have any questions, you can always find me on my website, www.afriendlydivorce.com. Please know I wish you the best, and I know that you can make it through the transition of divorce. Stay strong.